I was present for wave after wave after wave of extreme cosmic apocalypses. They were sequential, they were overlapping, and they were infinite. It was the destruction of all being and its annihilation into meaninglessness. It was the utter void. It was not fun. and, and for a little while, and here's the only time where I had any sense in any of these three things that I was conscious. I sort of became conscious and I thought, oh no, Iboga's not going to work for me. They're going to leave me here. And the long cosmic pause, I begin to realize, oh my God, this is the primal source. And this didn't come all at once in words. It took me a while to sort of fill this feeling out. This is the primal source of my inability to love since I was a child. And I was like, whoa, so maybe Iboga is going to work for me. There's more. And so there was an image probably after the overlapping cosmic annihilations. um, and it's a figure that was female, though that had to be intuited. And here comes the the high strangeness part. What I saw was as if I was looking down on an infinitely tall, maybe antique radio or a jukebox from the 1950s that was made entirely out of shiny black metal and filigreed in gold and lit from below with spotlights. So it's this bizarre structure. And up at the top of it is like if you took a slice off the top of a sphere, so you've got this cookie thing and it's sitting on top, and that's the head. And she has two closed eyes. And it's a female, no doubt. How, yeah, down below, infinitely far away, is a little sort of rectangular object that I looked at and think, oh, what the hell is that? Is that numbers? No, no, it's an abacus. No, no, it's not an abacus. It could be a typewriter. No, it could be a computer keyboard. So it's either numbers or an abacus or computer keyboard or typewriter. I don't know what it is. And then there's more. Over on the right, because that's all on the left-hand side, in the space corresponding to the infinite jukebox, there's nothing. But in the space corresponding to the little abacus or keyboard, there's an object. And it might be like a stone, or it might be ore, like metal ore, or I think, oh, it could be a heart, or it could be an embryo. Boop. And one more thing came to me. Oh my God, this female figure. It's female. It's not male. I thought males were the bad guys. I thought women were good. What happened to the Earth Mother? I mean, women. I like women. Women. Where's my mommy? And this woman was a woman, but she was no better than a guy. She still was leading to the void. Whoop. End of experience. And as I as I start to come out and people are dancing around me, and I just started to cry like I've never cried in my life. Just this deep, deep, and being a white New Englander, I didn't let it go for as long as I now, and even then, wish that I had. My head was just buried in a pillow, and I was just crying more deeply than I've ever cried. Because one of the things that happened when I was realizing that this cosmic void is what kept me from loving. I saw the faces of my wife and my children, and it just ripped me apart. And I wish I'd been able to participate for longer in that feeling. And then, as often is the case in these ceremonies, there were these really nice women who saw that I was in distress, and they just held me and were kind, and I was crying, and it was like, wow, this is okay. And bang, that was it. Um, that was it.
Uh, do I get to go, or is there more?
Yeah,
I can't tell what the look
I
is.
think so. I think so. Yeah,
So, is it true that you have not been able to feel love?
I think so. Yeah.
How did that feel? Like, so when you see your wife and children, who you're supposed to love, is there guilt? What do you feel about that in the moment?
Oh man. So I'm I don't mind, honestly, for whatever peculiar pathological reason, I don't mind sharing the depths of my psyche in public, which is
That's why
probably
we're here, man.
that's why we're here. But I'm not going to answer that directly because there's something prior that I'm grappling with. So, and it involves um, the distinction between cosmology and psychology. Okay. It's just now, 40 years of intellectual interest in Hillman and Jung and the Mundus Imaginalis comes flooding in, which I don't want it to do. I just want to draw snakes for the rest of my life. I mean, because honestly, I sort of think that would be more therapeutic. And yet, I'm still that guy. And these questions are not, I think, unimportant. And they reflect my understanding and attraction to Corbin. One of the things that I was have long been most enthusiastic about without really understanding is Corbin's use of the term psychocosmology, which because I mean, Corbin was an associate, a friend of Jung's at the Eranos conference, but he was a mystical theologian, and he didn't really give a shit about psychology, you know. And so Corbin's understanding of reality is that it's very hard to make a hard and fast distinction between the human psyche and God, the angels, and the cosmos. So he just obliterates that distinction by referring to psychocosmology. You can't really have one without the other. They're part of the same thing, which is hard for a 20th century person of the normal sort to understand. But I do think, as a footnote, because I don't want to go here now, those are the kinds of issues that Kripal and frankly you are having to deal with in explaining the material as you understand it, which is that the psychological understanding is insufficient for reality. And one of the first things that occurred to me in a couple of days after my experience was, oh, Jesus, dear God Almighty, this is what they mean by myth. I've always been looking at mythology from the human rational point of view. Oh, let's study mythology. And oh, here's Oedipus, and here's all these the gods of the Greeks, and it all seems, pretty reasonable. But as Jung himself, how did Jung put it? An encounter with the living God is not a good time. you know, and Jung himself, to put it in this kind of context, always was kind of bifurcated. Let's assume that he had these some version of these cosmic experiences that just blow any trace of human ideation out of the water. And then he comes back and he's got to go to work. And what does he do? He's a psychologist. And he's got all these psychotics in front of him. And he thinks, oh my God, I wonder if they're, oh no, what if they're, oh man, wow, these people are fucked. you know, and so my job as being Jung is to try to make some sort of connection between what we're going to have to call psychology, because I don't know, because I'm not a priest, so I'm not going to do that, and the experience of, I don't know, whoever this was. People have told me since that, oh, you met Kali, the Hindu goddess of the void. I don't know. She didn't say that's what her name was. She wasn't in a mood to chat. But maybe that's who it was. And so, you've got mythology on the one side, as Freud pointed out, and then Jung took and ran with. Um, so mythology on the one side, and then the psychological interpretation on the other. And if you're making that transition from the cosmic void, or alternatively, the right-hand side of my picture, which has yes to be filled in, the empty part above the little heart, or the embryo, or the golden nugget, or whatever it was, if you're making a transition from mythology or cosmic whatever to the merely human, that's not, yeah, you can say, well, I saw this great huge refrigerator thing that was the goddess Kali. And people say, oh, cool. And that's the end of that discussion, and you're stuck in this middle place there. That's a thing to say. I don't know what your question was.
It was cleverly avoided.
Oh. So here's the story about me. Yeah, that I'm perfectly willing to tell in public, which I'm not, I'm certainly not sure is true, but I might be stuck with it until it can be dislodged. Maybe it's true enough to be useful for me. I said before I went down this time, and I've probably said it to you, that I kind of wonder if early in my life I didn't have some monstrously huge experiences that, had I been in another culture, I would have been sent off to shaman school. But instead, I was plunged in a cold water bath and told that it was just sickness and that it was all in my head and that it wasn't real. And before I went down this time, I told people, gosh, that can't be good. If you're 6 years old and you have these monstrously enormous experiences and you're told they're not real, well, fuck everything else then. Why would you even bother if the most important, most powerful, most real experience you've ever had, utterly terrifying, oh, just ignore it, it was in your head. No, you're in the wrong culture, man. And coming out of this, which really does, you know, how, I mean, again, it's the story I'm now telling myself. This feels like an amped up version of some of my earliest horrific experiences, now filtered through, the psyche of a 70-year-old man. And so I will not go through the history of my love life with you. There are limits,
Drat.
but Drat, but if the most real experience to remember is apocalypse, the void, and the death of God, then it's going to fuck up your erotic life because, at least I was terribly afraid of becoming so attached to anything, any person, to love something that you know is going to end in the void. Because
So,
that feeling of loss and emptiness, I mean, it'd be easy to do a Freudian analysis of this, you know, and oh yeah, he had trauma when he was a kid, it fucked up his life, and once he gets over this, he'll be fine. Then he'll be able to love again. But I don't think that's enough.
so
That's
but
the
wait, those were the visions when you were a kid, or
yeah,
the experiences were sort of apocalyptic in the same way that this is apocalyptic?
I can remember three instances, which I've mentioned to psychologists and psychoanalysts several times, and they all said, "Oh yes, every child experiences these things," and I have no doubt that this is really common. Um, are also fucked up. So there was one time, not in chronological order. I remember lying in bed one night when I was, I don't know, young. I don't know, young, and thinking, oh my God, there is no God. Bang, everything just gone. That was an experience of negativity, void. I don't know what prompted it, but the bottom fell out of my young universe, meaninglessness. So that corresponds to this in some way. I was young, so I don't know. It was a little tiny version of this experience, which was bad enough. I also used to get. Well, this is the fever dream story, which we have talked about. Um, every time I got sick, I would get a high fever, and when I got a high fever, I would get delirious, and those deliria were utterly terrifying. The whole world would shake, and there would be, I mean, literal demons. I mean, literal, figurative demons. I don't know if I saw demons, but it was demonic. And that was like a regular feature of my young life, and it wasn't real. And then there's one other thing I was talking to Marco with, because this would refer to Jacques Lacan's mirror stage in ways that I do not understand. But I remember once when I was small enough to still need a stool to be able to see myself in the bathroom mirror. So I was pretty young, maybe 6 or something, and probably being in one of those fever dream states and seeing my image in the mirror and having the most powerful dissociative or depersonalization experience that I've perhaps ever had. I was not there. There was nothing inside. I was gone. That fucks you up when you're a little kid. And so, okay, so if I put on my Freud hat or my Lacan hat, or, pick your favorite analytical tradition, my chemistry hat, you just take a pill, you'll be fine. I don't, yeah, yeah. I've always been resistant to that, which is why I've been interested in Corbin and Jung and Hillman and all these other things, and why your stuff and Kreipel's stuff really hit home. I've always been resistant to those kinds of reductive analyses of the most profound human experiences. I mean, if you write off those experiences, it means that poetry and art and literature is just fluff. you know,
Well, you know what it puts me in mind of, and it reminds me of kind of how you talk about why you've been interested in this in your adult life now, which is, I mean, and I don't want to, I'm not saying that this is your experience, but it just puts me in mind of this, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But it's kind of like saying, okay, um, this little period of time that we call the span of your life, that bunch of bullshit's over. Let's get back to before you got fucked up. Uh, Take two. You know what I mean? So it's like, let's get back to what was real, which were those experiences. Now that we're over all this nonsense and noise called your entire life, let's get back to what was real that you were blocking out with your entire life because
Yeah, I
that's what
like
you were
that.
taught.
Yeah. I like that.
We will now
Yeah.
resume the truth. Here it is,
Yeah.
Tom.
We will now. Let's do this again. Wait, yeah. I mean, in some sense, yeah,
It's kind of
sure.
validating in a way that you were correct that those things were the real that were being blocked out, in this search for who am I and what did my mom do.
I
It's
mean,
kind of
I
like, yeah,
look. I mean, so let me back off my enthusiastic yes response just for a second. I am still really processing this,
yeah.
and and what's clearly most God important and efficacious is that the way in which it is being processed is not with the intellect. That's not going to do it. And that's a danger for me because I think a lot. And I've written a lot, and I'm not writing now, and I don't intend to, because this is and I think the artistic and potentially musical response is much more important for me. Look, two of the central theme that James Hillman and Corbin share comes from Corbin, and it's the idea of the thought of the heart. And in Corbin's rendition of Sufism, the thought of the intellect is, it's handy, you know, it's neat, it's useful for sure. You don't want to get rid of the thought of the intellect, but in order to be really truly human, what you have to develop is something that they call the thought of the heart, which is it's kind of like thinking, but it's a somatic, and we don't have words for it in English. You can't say
Well,
emotional.
let me see if I can, because this is getting to a question that I was going to ask you, which is, where is this contained? So, for instance, is it about you waking up? Is it about self growth, or is there the tinge of interconnecting with all with this, or not? Because when you talk about heart, are you talking about beyond you? Like, in other words, these issues that are coming up, they seem both to apply to you personally, but then also, are they transpersonal? Are they, and does it bring you to that mind space, or is it just an intellectual thing that you can talk about? Um, because, like with my so-called awakening or whatever, there was the breaking down of my psychology to the point where I understood that my problems were not my own, that we all have them, not just intellectually, but it brought me to this other sense of being, which I call heart, which is that the immersion back into essentially the ecosystem, back into being, a cog in I don't want to say a cog in the machine, but, an organic process person. Are you there? Is that where you're going with this? Or is it like, no, now I'm just expressing myself through art and emotion instead of the intellect? Do you know what I mean? Is that making sense?
I believe that it makes very good sense, and the short answer is, and I want to say more, but the short answer is that I thought of you, not in that moment, but within in the days after. Um, and the short answer is I think perhaps I had a peep through the aperture into the what I'm here calling the cosmic. And for because as I've tried to articulate here, there are no human categories that are adequate to describe or even um, well, you can point to it, but to describe this experience, and I had, and so that's why I'm trying to got too many parts moving. There's a there's a there's a phrase or paragraph in your book Urgency that was the hook for me, and I think it was when you were saying, well, all the human ideas and all that stuff, probably, it's kind of Darwinian and you had to have that and you grew up and you became an ape and then you became a human and that's okay, but none of that shit is any use at all for this beyond the human. And I was trying to come up with as a rather than a way of referring to the sense of cosmos, and I thought, well, it's inhuman, but that has a connotation of evil, and this wasn't evil; it was just nothing, you know. And so inhuman is wrong. And then I thought, well, sometimes people use more than human, and I thought, no, it's still got human in it, and so I couldn't quite find a term for and and then one of my students, I think yesterday, said, well, how does this relate to the mundus imaginalis? And I kind of went boom, 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 because that is the question for the person I was until 2 weeks ago. And the best I could do was to say, well, maybe as vast and huge as the mundus imaginalis is for Corbin, what it does is give you access to a little aperture that you can peek through and then, oh dear me, see what you refer to as however you refer to it. But this experience was not of the magnitude of yours. I mean, I'm pretty confident of that.
Well, even yeah, go ahead.
But I think it was analogous to it and like it in kind, perhaps. But
I
it
was going to say
wasn't.
it's like I'm talking about prior to that, just the psychological giving up the separate self sense where that gets recontextualized, I would say, into heart, into being more of someone who would do better in a nature culture than America, you know?
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's bringing you there, or is it still self-contained? Is it still you
Oh,
that
so
is
so
being worked
yeah,
on?
yeah, yeah. And I mean, see, this is the sort of this. I think I understand your question. I'm not sure I can. Here's what occurs to me to say. I was in the week that this is interesting, actually. Let me do this because people might be interested in this. I went to coastal beach town of Pisciguaba after this experience, which is lovely, quiet coastal beach community. And I spent a week there doing almost literally nothing but drawing scales on snakes and pictures of, old refrigerators or whatever the hell she appeared as. And and for 4 of the days I was there, I was with two other guys, one a German guy and the other an American, and they were very quiet and they had their own space, and we almost never interacted. And I was very quiet. But they left on Thursday morning, the next weekend. And it wasn't until they left that I really felt like I could begin to um, access my memory of this experience. And I thought, oh, it's because they were people. And there were people in my conceptual space. And when there are people around, you put on your people suit. Whether you're seeing them or not, you're in society and you're Tom Cheetham. And if they do appear from their room, you know how to talk to them and do. And so I had my suit on the whole time they were there, even though I rarely saw them. And then when they left, I was just totally alone. And that was the first time that I thought, actually, I was doing a drawing and I was listening to some music. And there was this just brief moment where, oh, that was that feeling. And it'd take me weeks to explain it, but it was like, oh, I'm back there or I'm close to there. But I had to take off all the layers that come with I don't know, social interaction. You just have to be able to strip yourself down. Now, did I get rid of myself? No, no, no. I wish I did. No, I don't. That's the awkward part of coming back is that, oh, I'm me again. But I thought I wasn't going to be me again. And and that's the sort of awkward part. And remember that it was true, all three of my experiences, that I was barely conscious of most of what happened until the very end, when I kind of show up again. And I think in when the cosmic apocalypses were happening, there was maybe some of the person I would call me. And then when my fear that I was going to be left there started to be percolate, that was more of me. And then when I was hanging there thinking, oh no, I've been abandoned by Iboga. And then I realized, oh, that's the cosmic fear. Then I'm back, then I'm back. But I think those prior events they weren't like my experiences. They were events that were being shown to someone who was soon going to be there. you
Hmm.
know yeah, so it's not possible really to,
You
that's
know,
why
one
it's.
sort of offshoot of this is you may fairly immediately recognize, we were talking in previous episodes about how do you recognize if someone's real or like a charlatan or whatever? Why do you trust anyone?
Mm,
And that you can have the self awareness and the honesty to say, oh shit, I'm back to normal and I don't like this or whatever, or I
yeah,
wish I was, or whatever. So maybe one just sort of inherent thing you will have developed is the ability to just see who hasn't done that. You know what I mean? If you bother to read
yeah, yeah,
any sort of like quote unquote spiritual literature or whatever, these guru types, maybe you'll be able to
yeah.
pick up on like, oh, that's someone who just didn't realize they've got the knowledge base, they've had some experiences, but they didn't realize they're back or they didn't want to be back. And that's why they went wrong and
Yeah,
became, nuts. So I don't
yeah.
know. That's just a thing to
No,
look
no,
at.
no. I think that's a super. That's got to be super important. I'm dubious, although maybe not. I was going to say I'm dubious that I have developed that sensibility, but maybe I've got just the beginnings of it. And here's another, I think, related issue. I'll use Jung as the example. If you have experiences which are, I don't know, like this, um, you could come back and be a prophet. You could say, "Oh shit,
Yeah,
I've seen." I mean, you mean pick your favorite. I mean, Muhammad, Jesus, Buddha. I mean, they have these extraordinary experiences of whatever, and for the sake of argument, we'll kind of lump them all together as that. And that may
right.
be real, that might be really wrong. There might be way more differentiation to be done by not human beings, but maybe by somebody up there saying, "Oh yeah, yeah, Krishnamurti, he no, not quite. Buddha, yeah, and then Muhammad, oh, that's totally different. Yeah, that's like over here. Maybe there's those sorts of experiential differentiations, but but I didn't come back as a prophet. I mean, it's like, whoa. And Jung didn't either, although he has, every once in a while, Jung will adopt the prophetic voice, and it drives me fucking crazy. And then he'll drop back down into being a Swiss farmer, who happens to be, but you can totally see why having uh, an experience which is way more than you can handle would would go off wrong, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah. And one of the glories for me, and this is a footnote, of Corbin and his understanding of Gnosticism was that it was always utterly individual and individuating. And then that doesn't answer your question about the nature of the person, the nature of uh, the personhood of such an individuated being who has, I don't know, fused with his angel.
Yeah.
I don't know what Corbin would have said about that, but he avoids the problem of the annoying prophet standing on Fifth Avenue telling you that I have the only truth, you
Right.
know? Yeah.
Well, there's the question of the person who comes back and what they do with it, and that's one thing. But I'm really trying to figure out like what are the limitations of this? What is it actually trying to affect in you? Is it trying to, and you may not know this right now, I'm just saying,
Yeah. Mm.
these sorts of drug trips or plant medicines, are they trying to break down the separate self sense and reintegrate you into the all, the Gaia network, or are they trying to take you on, or can Americans not even see past being taken on their
Yeah.
own personal journey that is for their own personal growth to build up that separate self sense? And that's
Oof.
why they come out and become like, masters
Yeah.
in a weekend or whatever.
No, that's a really complicated, big question. Let me say, but it's super important. I want to get clear about it. So, the way you're framing it, let's see, is what's, and of course, we'll hold in abeyance how the fuck this plant and why a plant? I mean, and why this plant rather than, I mean, I have zero thoughts about that. But okay, let's assume that the plant is yeah, responsible for this. And what is the goal of the process? I think, I mean, just to be anthropological, I think the people down in Brazil who are running these things think it's to bring sweetness and light and love and joy to the world. That's why they are doing what they're doing to bring this tradition to Brazil and elsewhere.
Is that what
The
they would say in Gabon?
I don't know. I
I'm going to go with
honestly,
no.
I honestly have to. Yeah, you got to go. I honestly don't know, but I
No,
would,
no, I was saying I'm going to go with no.
um, I wouldn't go with no, because I think Greg is a legitimate product of that educational, that shamanic religious educational system, and that's their goal is to bring harmony, sweetness. Okay, so but that's beside the point. That doesn't mean they've understood the plant. And your question is I think this is important. So there's the meaty tradition, or better to say traditions, because there's lots of subcults. And then there's the plant itself. And you were asking about the plant itself. And I think that's the question, because maybe in Gabon, a couple of them got it right and some of them don't get it right. What's the plant want? I mean, I don't, and and of course I don't know, but here's my hope for my experience. So the picture I have, it's got the refrigerator on the left hand side with the abacus on the bottom, And on the right-hand side, there's a big nothing that is yet to be developed. And down below it is something which is maybe iron, maybe it's ore, maybe it's an embryo, maybe it's a heart. It's a little undeveloped lump of matter. That's an alchemy. If you could take that alchemically or any other way, but it suggests to me, and I don't have anything to contradict this, that the the figure of the void on the left hand side, which has arguably governed the first 72 years of my life, has a compens. You could bring Jung in. Ah, yes, the coincidentia oppositorum. Or if you do take the refrigerator figure as Kali, she's got two aspects. She's got the destructive aspect, but she's also the source of all creativity and positive stuff. And it would be the male on the right-hand side, the females on the left. And so it seems like kind of too obvious to maybe even be true that I was shown the unfilled portion of my whatever being, existence, personality, and that my job now is to try to fill it in. And I can say with some degree of accuracy that in the days since this experience, I believe that I'm beginning to jettison what I now and before realized was a kind of underlying, well, fear, but I mean, sure, yeah, underlying fear, but an underlying sense that if I didn't keep holding myself up, that something bad would happen. You know, you just always, it's characteristic of several people in my family. We just got to keep things happy, keep them going up because what's down there, and whoa, well, no wonder. But now that I've seen it, well, poof, fuck it, just relax. And like you said, let's run this tape again now. Let's go back
Right.
to 3 years old and see if we can get this a little bit better.
Take it from the top.